Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to a break.
On so many levels.
Good evening. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, I'm Liana with NACOL. How are you?
Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Brian Wheeler, Director of Communications for the city. And here is our chairman, Mr. Watson.
Hello.
And you're muted, Mr. Watson.
Good evening, Brian. How you doing?
Good evening.
Hi, Ms. Perez. How are you?
Hi. I'm very well, thank you.
Good
Nice
see you in
nice to put the
person.
face to the emails.
Yeah. Hey, Nancy, how you doing? Got her mute on. I see Bill over there. So, Ms. Perez, you're out in Tucson,
I am.
Arizona. Cool. What's the weather like this time of year out there?
Well, it's nice. It's 70 degrees today. Last week it was 90 degrees, and the week before that we had snow.
Oh, okay. It's
So
almost
it's a
like
mix.
that's almost like Virginia in March or April. You can get a little bit of everything in 1 week.
Yeah, that's how we are.
But you guys don't have to worry about the humidity that we deal with in July and August.
No, but it's still like 112.
Yeah.
It's not that comfortable unless you're inside with the air conditioning.
I hear you. All right, let me just I'm gonna kind of play around with my Zoom for a second. I just saw, looks like Sarah Burke popped up. Got her mute on.
Hey, Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah, she's got a heck of a teacup there too.
There you go.
Very fashionable.
Hey, Bellamy Brown, how you doing? All right. So we got Bill, we got Nancy, Bellamy Brown. We got our superstar from all the way from Arizona, Nicole. See Max Robinson. All right, yeah, this is 5 o'clock, maybe a little bit of a tough time for a lot of folks, folks getting off of work. Philip did say that he was going to be late. He sent me a text. And no, Miss Johnson works, during this time. She was going to try to get off a little bit early. Maybe if you guys don't mind, if we can wait a few minutes to see if anybody else comes online.
Sure.
Great.
How long are we scheduled for? 2 hours or 3 hours on this session?
I think we have the availability to do up to 3 hours. I was hoping to get it done in 2.5 hours. If we can, I gotta get these kids into bed. Hoping I can hold them at bay during this meeting. My wife's working, and I'm hoping I can get these. Well, I've got a teenager, but since we've been in COVID, my two little ones have worn her out. So she no longer really wants to help. We'll see how long it takes.
Send them on a treasure hunt. Make up a treasure hunt through the house, and they have to go find certain things throughout the house. So that might keep them busy for an hour.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
And at the end, they have like cookies and marshmallows or whatever their favorite treats are at the end of the treasure hunt.
That is not a bad idea.
It could be even like, oh, go to the dryer and fold the clothes.
I was going to say, find all the dirty clothes and put them in the wash. Yeah.
If I turn this computer screen to the left, you'd see a couch full of them. All kinds of stuff that we need to put away.
My kid's job is to match up socks, matching clean socks. Whether they match or not, it doesn't matter. If they're for the right person, they go in that pile. That's their It's their job.
And matching socks are a difficult, very unusual thing to come by in this house. I'm just gonna send Miss Johnson a text real quick.
The last thing I heard from Ms. Johnson was that she tried to get off at 5:30.
Oh, okay, yeah, here's a,
Yeah, but not really sure.
okay. And she's been having some issues with her actual computer. So when she comes on, she'll probably be on her cell phone, but she is coming. So that's good. Let's see, we've got, what members do we have here? 4 of us, right? So with 4 of us here, I'm not sure if Miss Gilmore, I haven't heard from her. Oh, let me see. Miss Johnson was asking me about the Zoom info. Trying to think of the best way to send that to her via text. Let's see here. Hey, Mr. Wheeler, I'm going to send you Miss Johnson's phone number. And if you can send her via text, if you have that capability, the Zoom info,
Yes, sir.
that would be awesome. Let me just send that to you. And I apologize to our guest.
You're fine.
The Zoom world is convenient and inconvenient. It's convenient because we didn't have to have you fly all the way out here from Arizona, and we get to meet you in person, well, virtual in person, without having to get on an airplane. So let me just send Wheeler this information.
I had somebody on a call the other day say that she missed having just phone calls and not the virtual meetings, because it was during phone calls that she would just get her daily steps in, because she could walk around, you know, with her headset and do her, you know, and still do her phone calls and not have to be in front of the screen. So she's like, I wish
Right.
we could get back to a little more of that, because I'm not getting in my steps.
Good point. Okay.
No one will judge you if you just walk in place while we're doing this.
All right, so it is 5:05, and let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Well, you know what? I was just thinking real quick. Is Michael Payne on?
Yes.
He is on.
I'm here.
Yep.
My view is let me see if I can change my view here. Okay, now I can see Lisa's got a photo of herself right there. I was like, man, your face is awfully still. Okay, all right. All right, so again, let's call this meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any recommended changes?
Chairman, I'd like to see under number 8, the pending business, item D, the work session with city council, moved up to A. And I think status of complaints to B, and then C and D would then be community engagement and board vacancy. For myself, I see C and D having a little bit more importance than for this discussion this evening, to make sure we get to a nice discussion and have them up at the top.
Okay, so you're suggesting item D be A, right? For the work
Item
session?
D, yes, sir.
Okay, and then
And item C become item B as in boy.
item B, complaints.
And then
Then the other-
C would become board vacancy, and then D would become community engagement.
Okay. All right. All right, so would somebody,
And that's a motion.
this is one of those Robert's Rule moments where I guess somebody's got to make a motion to
Yeah, I move
the
we,
changes.
I move we accept the
Thank you.
altered agenda.
And somebody, I don't believe the chair can second.
I think we're good if Nancy made the motion and Bill seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so then we'll go ahead and I revise the order of those items on the agenda. Any other recommended changes? Oh, okay, so the agenda is approved with those changes suggested by Ms. Carpenter. Announcements, well, actually don't have any big announcements other than I hope everybody has a safe Thanksgiving. I've been thinking today of the things I'm thankful for, and I'm very thankful for my family, and thankful to have this opportunity to be on this board, and also thankful that most of the people in at least my immediate world have been safe through this pandemic, and just hope that now that we have these vaccines, that the whole reality will begin to change over the next year, and we can get to a better place. Anybody else have any announcements? No. Okay, well, nobody's got any announcements. We will go into our question and answer session with our two guests. We are very lucky to have two extremely knowledgeable people in the world of police civilian review boards. We've got Ms. Perez, who's joining us all the way from the other side of the country. And of course, we've got our local talent here, and Sarah Burke. And if we could start off with Ms. Perez, maybe introducing herself to the audience, that'd be great.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation to speak with you. This is kind of a 360 moment because we were out there. God, I think it's going to be 3 years now, Sarah, right? In January, it'll be 3 years that we went out and met with the original, the initial task force to create your committee. And we always like to kind of follow up and see where, progress and maybe where we can help you some more, or maybe what, obstacles or challenges you may be having. But as James said, I'm Liana Perez. I'm the Director of Operations for NACOL. I have been a member of NACOL, which is the National Association of Civilian Oversight for Law Enforcement. They've been in existence for over 25 years. I've actually been a member for almost all those, well, at least 25 years. I was the police auditor for the city of Tucson for over 20 years. And I retired back in 2014 and kind of went to work, did go to work as a contractor for NACOL to kind of give back to an agency that helped mentor me and, along my profession. And then in 2016, I was called back to the city of Tucson to do some additional stopgap measures because the person that replaced me left. I was only supposed to go back for 6 months and ended up staying another 3 years. But now I'm retired again and actually doing work for NACOL, NACOL full time. And NACOL, I mean, this is what we do. We help communities either in the infancy stages or even just the initial discussions of creating oversight, all the way up through, existing agencies looking to maybe restructure things that may not be working or get additional training for their boards. We work with all the different models of oversight. As you can imagine, this year for NACOL, because I handle all the phone calls and all the emails that we get, and it has been an overwhelming year, I will tell you that, with phone calls and emails. The report that I gave to our membership at our annual conference in September, our virtual annual conference, was that between myself and our Director of Training Operations, we responded to over 19,000 emails this year alone, just us two. and phone calls. So a lot is going on, obviously, in the role of civilian oversight. And, and we're here to act as a resource and, and answer questions and provide whatever support we can.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, we really appreciate you being here. I can imagine, with all the changes that are happening, and particularly in Virginia, you probably are getting other localities right in our state too.
We've actually talked to quite a few people from different communities across your state. A lot of interesting stuff is going on there too. And a lot of other states are looking at what's going on in Virginia.
Okay, great. So most of us probably know Miss Burke, but Sarah, if you can introduce yourself to the group, that'd be excellent.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Burke. I was on the initial Civilian Review Board, which was tasked with coming up with the oversight model and ordinance and bylaws that you all now operate under. As you know, we made a proposal that was not accepted by City Council, but City Council utilized our proposal to create the structure that you all work on now. And I have stayed involved, stayed in touch with Anna, and I've also fielded a lot of questions from 7 or 8 different localities in Virginia, looking at Charlottesville as an example. And just been continuing to do work as needed around the state on this. That's just for work. I'm an investigator. I do criminal defense investigations. Most of my specialty work. So I'm a mitigation specialist, which is a very particular type of investigator. I work on cases all over the place, really, where the government's seeking the death penalty against my clients. And that's me.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we are, at the end of the day, we're essentially a very new board. Sarah's group worked to create the sort of the framework and constitution by which we would ultimately not exactly work by, but they did the initial groundwork, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And of course, the new laws have the new law has been signed in the state of Virginia by Governor Northam. And so we've been taking the online NACO training, but I guess I'm kind of old school because I think that, any kind of one-on-one or in-person or actually talking to a human type of training, anybody can receive is always going to be a million times more valuable than kind of rewatching videos. And so one of my questions, Ms. Perez, has NACO began to sort of, big word for 2020, and they began to pivot a little bit, and maybe you're already doing this anyway, but providing some training to actual groups like ours. Again, we're in this sort of infantile phase, and we do have a budget, which is great, because that means we can pay for some training. What are some of the opportunities that may be out there, and then could you even customize your training for our needs in new law in our state?
Actually, yes, and yes, but I do have a question for you, which may help inform my answer a little bit more too. I was looking online yesterday or the night before, rather, at when your elected officials, adopted, the actual ordinance, your enabling ordinance, and so forth. You're at the point where you have your board, but have you hired your executive director at this point, or no?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
Right now, they've taken applications, and there's my son right there. And so, from my understanding, they whittled it down to about 5 applicants at this point. And so the city is bringing in a panel in which 2 of us will be on that panel. I apologize. And the short answer is no, but hopefully very soon that position will be filled.
Okay. Well, that helps. I mean, so that I can see, at what point in the process you are. The answer to the training question is obviously, we do all kinds of training, but we also do very custom, because everybody is either at a different point or everybody's model is a little bit different. And so sometimes, the needs are a little bit different at whatever stage in the process you are in. We were just, myself and our training director were on a call earlier this morning with Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And they're looking at some training to be not just for their board, but and they're in the process of creating their board, but we're going to do some training for the board, some training that involves how includes their city staff and elected officials, if they're interested, but mostly city staff that's going to be kind of liaisoning with the board and also with the police department, because it's kind of like a triangle of, information that has to continuously work well, because, you're needing information from the police department, how you're going to be able to do your work as a board is going to be very important. So we are with them and with other cities, we're actually kind of customizing training for the basic needs, and I can definitely send you over kind of like an outline of what we're doing in some other localities to see if that would be something that you would be interested in. You mentioned the annual conference training. I know when we spoke via email, so to speak, at the beginning of the conference, I was very interested in, making sure that you at least got into the training from our annual conference, which is usually in person, but we did it virtually this year. And, I really wanted you to be able to share, the links with your other board members, because I felt it was really important that you all get to at least some point of, even though the topics are all over the place, right? But they're very relevant topics, but none of it is necessarily the how-tos on, you're just getting going, you're taking complaints. What should you be listening for? What are effective practices? What are some of the challenges? How are you going to do outreach? How are you going to do your reports? A lot of that stuff is kind of like a little more basic operational things that I think as a board would probably be very helpful for you. Even though the content, if some of you have gotten on some of those links, the content for the annual conference there's a lot of stuff on there too, but it's not kind of the basic, how do you do the work? So we'd be happy to, customize something and send you over some ideas of something that we've done with other boards and see if that would be helpful.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as you point out, sort of every board's different, and sort of the unique characteristics that we have right now are we're a very small organization. I'm not aware of any municipality smaller than Charlottesville that has a civilian review board in the United States. Maybe you are, but that's the first thing. And so I like to listen to the trainings and find out that Chicago has 6 paid full-time public outreach people. We've got 6 volunteers altogether. But right now, where we are and where we may need to move very quickly is in revising our enabling legislation, ordinance, and bylaws. That's going to happen in at the latest the next 6 months, and it would be great if we could get some ideas and examples. I know you covered that a little bit in your training, your handbook, but you do that kind of training also?
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, basically what we would need to do is obviously compare the legislation that has just passed to, what you have already on the books and how, you're going to go forward with respect to making the recommendations to change that, and including your bylaws, which are really kind of your operational document, if you will. And that's something we've also done with other organizations. And you're not, Mr. Mendez, you're correct in that no agency is alike. There are small and large. There's, the New York Cities and the LAs and, the Chicagos. And then we do have a lot of small agencies that are incredibly effective with, given the right authority and the right tools. We can also help you, with some of the language and so forth for the recommendations of what you want to put into, an amended, like you say, amending your ordinance.
I have a question. If we have the right working group of, say, two of us, that are good with research and writing and kind of, with NACOL's kind of, practiced eye on what we want to move this board to in regards to the legislation, that's something that you could kind of assist us with. It wouldn't necessarily require the entire impaneling of the whole board to do this. You could do it with us, our smaller working group, and them coming back and presenting whatever sections they're working on at that time. I mean, could it be something like that?
Absolutely. A subcommittee or a smaller working group, as you say, sometimes those are, so that it still allows the board as a whole to meet on your scheduled time to discuss your other matters, but then also knowing that this other work is that we're assisting you with that, on the side as well. One thing that I would also suggest, and you can probably do this obviously as a board since you're already, impaneled as a board, similar to what Sarah's group did, was that you also, as you're moving forward with these recommendations, to be sure to have, the community, at least kind of the community stakeholder involvement or voices, we can help you with, with that input, because you're going to need support. I mean, I know it's been signed into law, but you're also going to need that community support behind it to change your local ordinance as well. So I think that, we need to, kind of assist you with how you would go about doing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we with the working groups being like two of us, it allows us to be able to meet more frequently without it being a public meeting. And in that way, we can really get a lot more work done that way than in this format, which we have to look at a lot of different things in our 2 hours a month.
Or 2 weeks now.
Or 2 hours every 2 weeks. Sorry about that.
But historically, once a month, you're right. Historically, because we have so much history now. But yeah, it has been. But go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, I think, kind of like what you're talking about with respect to your timeline is, and that's why I asked about your, what stage you're at in hiring your executive director, because I think, if you work towards getting all these other things in place and then hopefully get your executive director hired in that time too, then we would be ready to go with, training once, that person is on board, and so that you're all getting benefit of, the training at the same time as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You mean not starting any of this work until 60 days from now? I mean,
No.
Okay.
Definitely start the work with, the recommendations that you're going to make for, the changes to your ordinance and so forth. And then knowing, and then we can work on, what kind of training you'll need. I mean, we can certainly do some training for the board right now too. But I think, if you get somebody on board within the next 60 days, make sure that we get them covered with the training as well. Because I mean, they will be a critical component to your mechanism.
That makes a lot of sense. Anybody have any more questions for Ms. Perez at the moment? Yeah, I want to.
Go ahead.
I want to ask. Did somebody have one? No.
Yeah, I'm just going to say you do have training sessions on your national at your national meeting on COVID, but boy, is that a big issue in terms of trying to get business done, and that would be something that whatever ideas you have would be very useful.
Agree. We get asked that a lot, and you'd be surprised there's a lot of creativity out there with some of our agencies on how they're how they're operating under COVID restrictions and so forth. So definitely we could include that as well.
If I could, I had a question as well. So the new state legislation, at least as I understand it, like the two major changes are allowing subpoena power as well as disciplinary authority. Do you know of like CRBs across the country that incorporate both of those things as examples to point to of, there are CRBs in these localities that have been stood up with these powers, and this is, they've been successful in this model by, structuring in this certain way. Just because, at least from the city perspective, or at least my perspective, it's not just going to be dropping in like a couple lines to the existing ordinance. It may require like looking at best practices and things going on in other localities that have taken advantage of these powers.
Yes, definitely. We could send you some, I will send you some links to some of the agencies that have the subpoena authority, and you'd be surprised many of them are smaller agencies, even though the bigger agencies use it, but some of the bigger agencies actually have more investigative authority and so forth, but a lot of smaller agencies do have subpoena authority. So I can send you that. And the disciplinary one is kind of a challenge because not too many agencies have it, because their biggest impediment is state law that is keeping them from having that level of authority. But there are a few, and actually Madison, Wisconsin just adopted an ordinance about 2 months ago, November, I think it was the end of September, that gives, they have a board / auditor type of model, and it's pretty strong in the level of authority that they're beginning, and they're just getting going. But yes, they were given subpoena authority and disciplinary power. But I'll pull some and send you some. It's best to kind of see I'll also send you like the links to their websites, because then you can kind of go in and see how their enabling ordinances are usually on their websites, and so you can kind of see the language of how they address the levels of authority that they have. But I'll definitely pull some and send them to you.
That is priceless information. Very much appreciated. Got a couple questions for Ms. Burke. So, as we said, you were on the board, of course, that drafted the original ordinance and bylaws, and now we're in a whole new ball game, right? There's more opportunity, more power, right?
Yeah.
Maybe before we had a Model T, and now we have a Corvette, So I know you live in this world. You're a subject matter expert. And so what are some of the opportunities that you foresee that we have, that we can engage and lay down the tracks for and establish, going forward in 2021?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the research that we did was based on the existing law at the time. So, we knew we weren't going to have any disciplinary authority under the current law. We knew we weren't going to have subpoena authority. And there were some other rules with us being a Dillon rule state that we kind of we just didn't really dig that deep into it, because it would have been a waste of effort. But we did do a fair amount of research into the subpoena issue, because there are places that have this sort of quasi subpoena power, which is sort of what the board has now, where you get subpoena power. It's what our Human Rights Commission has. You kind of get it through the city attorney's office or through the city manager's office. So in doing that, mostly Guillermo and others on the research team created a really great list of boards whose information we got from Liana, but really did like a kind of in-depth analysis of each of those boards. I think at the time there were 39 boards with subpoena authority. And looking through them, I'm struck by what Liana said, which is that most boards with subpoena power do have more investigative authority. And I thought about that, and so I went back and looked at the law and what's changed. And we've been talking a lot about these two different things, subpoena power and disciplinary authority. I think those kind of became talking points for this new law. But when you look at it, it's really, it gives you such immense opportunities to change the ordinance as it is. So under the new law, the city can give you the following authorities. You can receive and investigate complaints by civilians. So you can also investigate and issue findings on other police incidents that were not initiated by civilian complaint. So that's like use of force, some racial profiling allegations can go in there, other related issues that might not be started by an initial civilian complaint, maybe internally filed complaints within the police department. If you choose to, you now have access both to access those files and also to investigate and issue findings on them, which is a big change. You can make binding disciplinary determinations in cases that involve serious breaches of departmental and professional standards. And that is determined by you all in the city and the Charlottesville Police Department. Sort of what are those serious breaches where you can make some binding determinations. You can investigate policies, practices, and procedures and demand a written record and explanation if the CPD doesn't follow through with your recommendations. You can investigate all investigations conducted internally at CPD, not criminal investigations, but not just civilian initiated complaints. And you can issue findings about their accuracy, completeness, and impartiality. You can request budgetary and expenditure related reports and issue recommendations. You can issue subpoenas, which is both the compelling of an individual to testify, but also the production of documents or records or video footage. And you can do any other duties needed to complete your job, which is a pretty broad sort of overarching element of the legislation. So I was thinking about that and thinking like, how is that different from what you all currently can do? And where are these differences? So right now, you all are sort of cabined within a number of constraints. So you can't review cases unless a civilian files a complaint. Then the internal affairs has to complete their investigation. It has to be resolved in a very specific way, or else you don't get access to certain resolutions. And then the complainant has to appeal. So I see those all as sort of barriers to your access to types of complaints and data and documents that you need. It's also a cumbersome process for the complainant who now becomes sort of an appellant. And it just limits what you can see. You can track cases as internal affairs is investigating. So you're supposed to get a copy of every complaint filed within 2 days, but you can't really act on that complaint until all those triggers that I mentioned before have been met. And you have very limited investigative authority right now. So right now, as it stands, if Charlottesville Police Department hasn't fully investigated their complaint within their 75 days, it sparks this conference between the executive director and the chief of police. They have a conference to discuss it. No board member is mandated to be there, but then the executive director comes back, presents what was discussed at the conference. If the board isn't satisfied, then they can ask for there to be an independent investigation. But the way it's written, it's only if the CPD's investigation is incomplete. So again, it's sort of a very narrowing of your scope of authority of when you can initiate your own independent investigation. So I think one of the things that's huge here is sort of what do you want your investigative authority to be? And where do you want that to come into play? So you could very greatly expand your scope of authority under this new law
to be able to review all complaints, regardless of whether regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether they are complete, regardless of whether they're filed by a civilian. And you don't have to wait for a complaint to be filed and appealed to look into issues like use of force, serious abuses of authority or misconduct, discriminatory stops, things like that. So the thing that it brought to my mind is an issue, Liana, that you aren't familiar with, but everybody in Charlottesville is a recent allegation of a Black man walking to church. Somebody called 911 and 5 police vehicles responded. He was asked his social security number, told to walk a different way to get to his church if he doesn't want to be bothered. And the police department is conducting their own internal investigation, but the CRB has no access to any of that. And I'm not aware of the complaint, if there's a civilian complaint filed, but you all might not get access to that and be able to review that case. And even if you are, that's if they determine it to if it falls into all these little categories that have to be met for you to get access to it. You might not ever see a case like that, but it might be important to you as the CRB to be able to have an independent investigation of cases that really garner the public's attention and concern and make people feel unsafe in our community. And so I think there are things that you can do under this new law to really expand your scope of authority. So I also just want to bring to light this study that is a fairly new study, which says that civilian oversight bodies that conduct independent investigations, not just reviewing police investigations, and have the authority to recommend discipline, are found to be associated with a reduction in racial disparity in disorderly conduct arrest rates and a reduction in racial disparity in police homicides of citizens. And so we're not just talking about this theoretically, like, wouldn't it be nice if you had some investigative authority? There's actually data to back up that the stronger the teeth of your investigative model, and the more you have in terms of being able to access the data, documents, people you need, and then make meaningful recommendations or determinations, that actually does improve racial disparities in policing. So I know that was a very long answer to your question, but I feel like the new opportunities are really huge, because it's not just like add a line, like Michael said, it's not add a line about subpoena power or add a line about disciplinary authority. It's really like considering whether, we made a proposal under kind of weak state law that I think our proposal was watered down so significantly that it's not a very great model as it stands. And now you have this option to really think bigger and make some great changes that I think everybody would be really happy to see, and hopefully we'll be successful. But it's a lot of imagination and a lot of research and hard work I think is going to go into this next few months for you all.
If I may add, I think that this is a real opportunity for you to make systemic changes that ultimately make the difference. And that's what one of the basic tenets of oversight is. It's not just about individual cases, it's what are you able to do and push forward and be able to make the recommendations that make the systemic, to prevent complaints, to prevent incidents from happening, because that's really where you want to get to at the end of the day. So.
Well, and there's still on the table, an independent police auditor position that hasn't really been discussed as much recently, because there's a lot of work trying to find the executive director and working out the sort of newness of the CRB. But, one of the things that I think this new statute brings to light is that, we're not just talking about reactive measures to very specific individual complaints. Like, this statute and the ways that most oversight bodies, Liana, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're moving much more towards proactive measures. And a lot of people are using auditors to really dig in and analyze trends of data and of policies and practices, so that you can stop events from occurring and work on those issues, rather than just sort of playing catch up when something terrible happens.
Exactly. Your recommendations, if they're supported by data, are much more effective and more likely to get implemented if you have the data. And if you don't have access to the data or access to all the complaints, the part of having access to the internal investigations is huge, because I will tell you that by and large, a lot of the stuff that is very provable are the things that are initiated internally, because it's not just he said, she said between complainants, a complainant and a police officer. It's usually the internal ones are the ones that can be proved, and usually those are the more egregious types of complaints or investigations, and you want to have access to those because you want to see the total picture, not just what the citizen complaints bring forward. The internally generated ones are very important.
And Liana, who would initiate one of those internally generated complaints? Is that an officer complaining about another officer, or is that somebody sort of in the higher rank asking for an investigation?
Both, usually generated by another officer or a commander, or what we're seeing a lot in some cities too. And I know, because I keep very close tabs on what's happening here in Tucson. What they're doing with, especially with the body worn cameras, is they're requiring like sergeants to audit the body worn cameras, and if they see something, inappropriate comments or unsatisfactory service or something that's coming out of these audits, then it generates an investigation into internal affairs as, on this body worn camera, we picked up, and this didn't look well. So there's all kinds of directions this can come in, but I just give that as, one of the examples.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like looking at some of the complaints that we had, we didn't get access to the actual complaints when we were impaneled, but we did often see that one complaint would actually initiate a separate investigation into a different type of misconduct allegation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it wasn't always that the complainant knows exactly what the violation is. They just know something didn't feel right or felt unsafe about this interaction, and then it isn't until somebody with expertise reviews it and then can see that there's actual other, possibilities of misconduct or something there. And I think that's sort of where the meat of it all is. And I think it's that the CRB having access to that instead of just this like subsection of a subsection of civilian complaints, it is a significantly more, it'll tell you a lot more about what's going on systemically at the police department.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have had presentations from the chief, and she reportedly has a system in place whereby supervisors and she can initiate internal affairs complaints themselves, and they get the same sort of opaque treatment as the rest of the complaints, but at least they're occurring. I have a question specifically for Sarah, and that is, I came in at the very end of when you folks were deliberating on the new documents. My impression was that the investigative model was not really on the table, not just for legal reasons, but because it was very expensive, very complex. It required a lot of specialized expertise. Do you really think that we could go do our own investigations?
Question. I honestly think Liana would probably be better to answer that. I know there are boards that do not have staffed investigators that do have more like de novo type review of cases. So they're not just looking at cases after they've been decided. They're looking at cases at the same same time. They're not waiting to review a completed investigation. They're initiating their own.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting problem because I mean, each model has their own faults. Like there is no one model. If there was one perfect model that just worked for everybody, then, you know, that we would not be here. But, you know, there are downsides. And I do remember thinking that the investigative model was more expensive, and also having just volunteers doing work who are not licensed investigators, it gets complicated. But you all are going to have a professionalized office through your executive director and hopefully your auditor. And I think, you know, I know that the way that the mayor is conceiving this all to go is to fall under sort of a larger equity, I can't remember if the term is like center or department. But I think there is possibility that we're a small enough area that you could probably get by with one of the staff people doing that review simultaneously, and with the guidance of the board, and having the board also be reviewing the files and data and documents as they come in. I just don't see that there's that much activity that it would be too difficult, especially if you had 2 full-time staff members. But then you find yourself in a position of, you know, we're looking for some pretty skilled folks here who can do all of this work, who can be both sort of investigators and analysts, and can run a CRB. So yeah, I think it's an important question, and one that I think the city's going to have to grapple with as to, you know, how much you know, money is there. But, you know, right now you do have in your ordinance that there are some moments where you could investigate. And I think you don't necessarily have to switch from a review style model to a full investigative style model. There's all these hybrids. So you could always come up with a way that you broaden your investigative capacity, and you broaden sort of access and scope. And then it's an iterative process from there, where you figure out, you know, what's needed as you go, and the pieces have to be willing to move.
Yeah,
what do you think, Brianna?
So yes, I mean, the investigative models are often looked at as more costly if you're creating, you know, a full investigative model, but I mean, it's all relevant to the size of your community, and, you know, how many complaints you're taking. Many of the smaller agencies or CRBs that actually have that authority, they kind of, it's not like they're investigating every single complaint. For the most part, maybe they're triaging which ones they believe should have an investigator. Some of them use contract investigators, so it's not like a full-time staff. So if they say, okay, in this particular incident, because of, you know, the high, you know, public attention this has gotten, or the potential ramifications, if we don't feel this is thoroughly and fairly investigated, we want to hire, use our ability to have, you know, an investigation occur, and then have a contract investigator. Atlanta has a CRB, an executive director, and then they also have on staff one investigator. I mean, that's for Atlanta, one investigator. And then I think they have, you know, some outreach, you know, crossover duties as well in their staff. I mean, they do have a bigger staff, but they don't have a lot of investigators given the size of Atlanta. So it may be something that, you know, you write into your ordinance of your ability to kind of, you know, triage which complaints you want to investigate, and either have an investigator on staff, or may have the ability to contract with an outside investigator.
Yeah, I was just going to finish up with that thought. That's thinking, I don't think that expanding the scope of your investigative authority or your powers means significantly more work, or, you know, that the numbers of cases increase that much. It just means that right now there's so few that are going to fit into your little, you know, kind of narrow box, that if you give yourselves more opportunity to access what's really going on in the police department, you'll have the ability to pick and choose which cases seem to be the most influential and important. That's, I think the problem now is there's no room for you all to use any discretion. It's like it has to be cabined into these very specific boxes, and you know, I'm not alleging that this is happening in our police department. I have absolutely no idea, but it wouldn't be hard to ensure that a CRB couldn't get any complaints in the way that that it's written now. It's just I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying you want to give yourself a lot more opportunity to have access to data and information in cases, instances, and complaints.
One more quick question. I think it's mostly for Ms. Perez. One of the things that we are dealing with right now is we're hiring the executive director. Our executive director has been very clear to us is an employee of the city who works for the city manager. And some of us on the board have even started to kick a little bit because we have not been involved in the screening of the candidates, and only 2 of us are going to be involved in the interviews. And there is no assurance even that our involvement in the interviews will be meaningful, because there's no one said, hey, we're going to take your views seriously. How do other boards deal with the issue of independence in a situation like this?
I wish I had the answer to that, because this is an ongoing conversation that I've had weekly with a group in another part of Georgia that is creating a board with an auditor and / board. And there's some serious, I didn't realize this. I knew there was something in the background that I just wasn't getting, and I didn't realize this till I actually spoke to the board chair a couple of weeks ago. There's some serious mistrust about the potential conflict of interest of the auditor reporting to the city manager, and the board. They're just setting this up right now, and the board wants to do whatever they can to try and have it be a system where there is no conflict of interest, because the police chief is also reporting to the city manager. And the question keeps coming up, what happens if, we have our executive director who's reporting to the city manager, as does the police chief. And what happens if there's a disagreement? Who's the tiebreaker, and where do you take out these potential conflicts of interest? And getting to the conversation more so that because the board is appointed by the elected officials, that although the executive director is an actual employee of the city, that still if there is a potential conflict or a conflict does arise, the board also reports to the board. And because the board is appointed by the elected officials, that the board can still go to the elected officials to resolve any potential conflict. I mean, I wouldn't say that that's optimal, and it's structured different ways. In most cities, the auditor or the executive director or the monitor, whatever you want to call them, do report to either the mayor or to the city manager, and they do the hiring. I mean, I'm glad to hear that you'll at least have some say in, or be able to sit on that. I may be able to pull a couple of, it's already in the process, but I mean, there should be something in the ordinance itself, or something about the wording as far as your ability to, what happens if the manager wants to fire that person? Does the board get to weigh in? There's all kinds of pitfalls that, this other city's struggling with as well. So,
no, thank you. I'm sure this will be an ongoing source of hopefully creative tension. So,
well,
thanks.
I know that everybody's sick of us talking about the bylaws and ordinance that we wrote, because I don't even think they're the best anymore, though I did for a while. There's a lot of sort of ways that we tried to cabin the executive director's power by making sure that sort of community control was implemented through the board. And I think almost everything that included that was deleted by the city. I think that's I know you all have sort of an ongoing list of questions for the city of sort of why certain parts of the initial CRB's ordinance were deleted and recrafted. And it may be that you want to get back to that particular issue of not even resorting back exactly to that language, but just looking, if somebody wanted to look at our proposal and see I think in every instance, it's like the conferencing had to involve one board member at least, or maybe two board members. And all of that was removed from the current ordinance. And so that the ED is now really cabined in like a very powerful position. And the ED is the only person with direct access to the police chief. And then they report back to the board. There's just a lot of like a clunky kind of like issues that I would imagine sort of being like a nightmare game of telephone where, you know, you have to sort of report back what somebody else said. And then if somebody has a question they can't answer, then the ED has to go back to chief. It just seems like if there was a setup where the board was actually given significant authority. I mean, the hiring, we were really adamant that the hiring be done by a panel that included you all, and similar to any decisions about firing or termination. And I think it's worth going back and taking a look at the sort of the two versions and seeing if any of our proposal was like not possible under the municipal structure, or if it was just unpalatable for whatever reason, because those are two really different battles. You know, one is sort of a political will battle, and the other one is, you know, if it doesn't fit under the city structure management style, then but that should be explained to you, is my point. Like, that's the city's job to explain that to you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been extremely, extremely informative. I feel so much more educated in the last 45 minutes. We don't have a ton of time that we're working with tonight, so I do want to open it up for public comment or questions. Mr. Wheeler, are there any folks waiting to make comments or ask questions?
We do have people getting in line. Let me
Okay.
get the clock activated here.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Wheeler, is Ms. Gilmore on? I think I've got some information that says she may be on by phone as you're checking for public comment people.
I do see Deirdre Gilmore in the webinar.
Okay.
As a panelist, so she should be able to hear us and talk to us. Mr. Chairman, first up is Harold Foley. Harold, you're on with the board. You've got 3 minutes.
Hey folks, how you doing? Excuse me. I am happy to hear that folks are getting the information they need. I think one of the things that's very important though, that that I've been like involved with the initial CRB fight and everything, is make sure that that you all come together as a team. If you don't come together as a team, then nothing's going to get done. Another thing too I want to talk about is community outreach. It's very important that you figure out, because I don't want y'all to build something and think the community is going to come to it. I really want the community to be able to say, hey, this is what's happening, right? I think it's unfortunate that what happened to the young Black man who was going to church didn't come to you all, because it is y'all place to figure what should be done policy-wise, in terms of the police department and policies that they are having. The second thing, third thing I want to talk about is fully putting y'all board together, making sure you got every member that you supposed to have on that board, because you don't want to have some mishaps happen where y'all want to vote on something and y'all don't have the right number of people to vote on it. So definitely, if you need to, community folks can pressure city council. But also, another thing I want to talk about is like y'all have the basketball in y'all court to put down a real strong bylaws ordinance to make sure you have some strong things in play. I know that July is coming soon, but I think if y'all look and do things ahead of time, where when y'all do have y'all work session with the city council, y'all already have y'all stuff together, right? And I'm going to leave y'all with this: GSD. Get stuff done. And that's what I'm all about, is how we're going to get stuff done. So thank y'all. And, you know, happy Thanksgiving for those who celebrate. And thank you for being able to take y'all time to do this. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Harold.
If somebody else in the audience would like to speak to the board, just click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9. The board's going to take up to 2 more people at this point in the meeting. Do we have any takers? Mr. Watson, no one else is raising their hand right now.
Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, well, that was such a wealth of information, and we are going to coordinate with Ms. Perez and Nicole. You know, again, we've been taking the classes, but we need to move forward and come up with a plan and, you know, leverage talent and knowledge that your organization has. Also, you know, we do have budget, so that's a good thing. We do have some ability to, you know, pay for some of the training and the skills that you guys provide. So we will definitely be in touch. Very appreciative of your time. I know Sarah's got a couple little kids like I do, and probably ready to get off the meeting and get everybody fed and to the bed and all that good stuff. So again, we appreciate.
I will send you some of this other information that I promised. So kind of in advance, and then maybe I'll just start working kind of on an outline based on what we've discussed here of, you know, how we can assist, and happy to get on another call with you or exchange emails with you to see how we can, you know, kind of solidify how we can help you.
That would be excellent.
Okay.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
And I'm also happy to coordinate with whatever your subcommittee for all this is, and be helpful in whatever ways you all need with, you know, resources or research we've done or information.
Okay.
You know, all that should certainly be available for you, and whatever you need, just ask.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Don't worry about it. Okay, moving along here. Let's see. So any board discussion related to that wealth of information that we just got?
Well, just, you know, as Harold said, you know, we need to get, if we're going to get some specialized or individualized training, we should arrange it as quickly as we can.
I concur with that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm a little disturbed that, you know, we didn't receive much in the way of this incident, you know, basically walking while black in the community, because it speaks so dramatically to what the Disparate Minority Contact Report was talking about. And it's happening every day. And I think it is very important that this body, in order to build trust within the community, have the deepest level of investigative powers that we can possibly, you know, put into an ordinance, and also, you know, witness subpoena power and all of that. Because that shouldn't have happened. I mean, we just got another email today about an issue that resulted in, according to the complainant who's presenting this information, physical injury. And you know, I don't know, you know, what that will result in, but it certainly speaks to how we need to take this, you know, gift that we've been given by the General Assembly and create something that, you know, will be helpful to the community at large, and also, create within, I guess, the law enforcement community, perhaps a different mindset and how responses are made. I think, we were just lucky regarding this latest incident that someone wasn't more seriously injured than, according to the statement, which, needs to be investigated, happened. And that we go as deeply as we can. And if someone says hold, then we can go back and regroup. But I think we should take the bull by the horns and go as far and as deep as we can with the enabling legislation as we work in our working groups to create a new path for this board.
Thank you, Nancy. Anybody else have further comments?
Just a clarification on the email that we got today. The way I read it, it identified university police as being the perpetrators. And so I don't know that we have that, the authority to address that particular incident other than by calling it out in public like you did. Also, James, can I talk about the walking while black?
I think you can. Well, so any cases that we have that that we received a complaint for that are not finalized, because that one is still under internal affairs investigation. I'm not a lawyer. Lisa may pop up, but I think we're very limited in what we can say about something that's being investigated, right? Because then that could jeopardize also if there's a
you're correct, of course, but it's just that we did receive an official complaint, so that's we can say that much.
Yeah, that's I'll say it's kind of an awkward position because you see something and you're in this format and then all you can say is we got a complaint.
Okay.
Is my understanding.
I hear you.
Yep. But yeah, I do personally agree that we need to be able to take full strength of the law that has now been established. And I've listened to other talks that Sarah was a part of, and a lot of times you can do more harm if you can sit here and be a part of the board. You don't have any power to do anything in the end. You can also do more harm. So hopefully, over the next several weeks and months, we can recraft this thing so that we are providing the community a high quality model that is working for everybody and is more proactive, not just complaint based, as she said. Complaint's a very negative word. I mean, maybe we develop something that's more proactive as opposed to, oh, the complaint came in, let's look it up. So as Harold said, it's going to take teamwork to get to that point, and doing it within a pandemic, but we got the right people. So I know we'll get it done. Anybody have any comments? Like some heads are shaking here and there, so no. If that is the case, I want to move to the pending business. And the top item after we revised it, I'm tracking as being the work session with the city council. So, we know that in order to really make this thing work, at a point in time, the city council is going to have to approve, right? They're going to have to vote on whatever we recraft. And part of that process is going to, require a meeting with the city council as this evolves. So I did send an email, saying, hey, city council, Northam signed the law. July 1st is right around the corner. I know we don't have our executive director, in place yet, but that person's coming. I hope they're here by at least early January. And so we'd like to meet, get some of these discussions. Yes, there's work we need to do internally, prior to meeting with them, but we also don't want to be going off in one direction and then their mindset is in a different direction. I was kind of hoping that we could get, on their calendar in January. They've got quite a few things going on, and good thing Michael's here, and so you can kind of talk about some of because I think they have some concerns with getting not only our ED in place, but also the the deputy director or the deputy city manager of equity, I think it is, and so that person would interact with the is it the Humanities Commission of Humanities?
Human Rights Commission.
Human Rights Commission, rather, as well as the PCRB. But Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about, maybe from a council perspective, because basically we'd like to get on their calendar as soon as we possibly can. And you can give us some of the thoughts from that perspective.
Sure. And I guess to begin the conversation, I mean, I think it's obvious from, the information, we got from Nicole and Sarah Burke that this is going to be a pretty meaty policy issue in terms of figuring out how we're going to move from here. It's not just like a quick add and drop, it's going to require thinking about, do we want to adjust the model? Is it a hybrid approach? And is a different approach going to require different staff positions, a different kind of board composition? And so it's obviously going to take time, and city council is sort of making the road as we walk it. I mean, we're not exactly sure what our next steps are either. So I just begin with that to say, none of this is to suggest this is like 100% what we say must be done, but to try to begin the conversation to work out how we're going to move forward. So when it comes to like the work session dates, we'd obviously received a lot of feedback once the state law was passed that, we want to begin work on this as early as possible because it's going to take some time. We had a strategic plan dates that got postponed and some of those were thrown out. Well, maybe replace it with that. And we got some feedback from council that when it comes to beginning the first work session, it may be beneficial to wait until the executive director is hired, as well as the position, deputy city manager position of diversity, equity, and inclusion, with the hope being that if the conversation begins with those staff in place, it'll just be a more robust conversation and a work session setting from the beginning because they're going to be such a central part of it. And so nothing's guaranteed by any means, but knock on wood. I mean, I hope, that deputy city manager position is someone who will be able to, be part of city government relatively soon. And there's a hope that sometime around mid to late January, an offer could be made to a candidate for the executive director position. And that would foreground the work. Again, that being important because I think internally within the city, once those positions are in place, the PCRB will finally have like a direct staff conduit within city government that has ownership and is able to provide full staff support, which is something that's not there right now. So that's some of the feedback I'd received from other counselors. A possibility is sometime in February. Other dates have been thrown out because I guess other things to be aware of are that our budget season is really going to take off in March through April. And that's busy anyway. That's going to be especially busy this year because of the pandemic and the changes and challenges that's created to our budget overall, as well as the comprehensive plan and affordable housing strategy and climate action plan are underway. At the same time, we've still got the pandemic and, all of which is to just say, I think those are things, we're trying to be aware of as council in terms of staff being stretched extremely thin. They're working behind the scenes and that stuff, community doesn't necessarily see it, but staff is definitely working extremely hard in these conditions. And that's a consideration in all of this as well. So I just that's where the conversation has been with other counselors. But I'm curious to hear from you all as well in terms of what are you looking to get out of an initial work session? Are you thinking of it as like an initial brainstorming, as the hope by the time you get to a work session, you'll have done some work internally on the board and you'll start be discussing like concrete policy details and what kind of hybrid model or, you want to go with, as well as what kind of support and time frame do you think is needed to get to that point? Because I guess finally, I think in conversations with council, I think our goal is, as much as possible, when this state legislation comes into effect in July, be positioned to take action around that time frame and to not be beginning work in July or after the state legislation comes into effect, and to have set the table to do that groundwork to be ready for that in July. And then working backwards from there, what is the kind of support you all need? What are you thinking in terms of your process, in terms of beginning this work, et cetera? So I don't know if that provided any clarity, but that's sort of where we've been in council in our discussion so far.
Anybody have any responses?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bellamy. I've already spoke. Go ahead.
Sure. Was Bellamy up there? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So from what I've gathered and what we've been talking about behind the scenes is that we're looking to have some action, in conjunction with City Council as close to July as possible. So and from what you've presented, it sounds like outside of the budget and everything else that you guys have going on, there's a little gap in there in the month of February that we could potentially start the ball rolling in that. We are already and will continue to be doing things behind the scenes to kind of, make things robust for that time frame, but we don't want it to be in a position to obviously where you guys are busy and we're, taking the back burner there. I think, and this is me personally, not speaking for the board, but if there's an opportunity to get something in there in February, provided that obviously these two positions are filled, I think that would help to facilitate things when July does hit, to have something, at least close thereafter.
My viewpoint's a little bit different. It's like, I don't want to wait until 60 more days to start our research. We can start working groups. We can connect with NACOL through a working group on research and writing on a new ordinance. Community engagement can certainly be, continue to be the small working group and become more robust. I know that, a lot's been going on over the last 62 months, and it's been a lot of energy being spent in a lot of different ways. But, to wait until March or April, and I really don't even know why we need a work session with City Council. My only concern is, where are they as a council when it comes to the enabling legislation? Do they support the things that that this board could potentially do, or do they not? That to me is the only question that I have in my mind. I think that we could certainly write an ordinance that adopts all of the new, it's a big chunk of time, but we could certainly, I think, do that. And perhaps have one work session, and then we go on about and do our business, and then present our ordinance by March or the first meeting in April, depending on the calendar that you all have, in order to get it noticed and public comment made, by the end of June, so that July 1st, this new ordinance, is good to go. And then we can finally have the kind of CRB that the community has been asking for over the last 3 years to do that. I don't see that we should wait necessarily until someone's on board. I mean, if they are as skilled, with the skill set that was being asked in regards to the, job listing, they certainly should be able to amp up pretty quickly on some of the basic kind of things. It's just the historical perspective. They may need, some time to get on board with. It's a lot of information historically to, to absorb if you're not used to this kind of dynamic within our community, or particularly this community. That would be my feedback.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, I guess, one question, which builds on what Nancy said, and that is, can you give us an idea about the unavoidable delays? If there's going to be a public comment period, how long is that going to take? There are going to be multiple readings in council. How long is that going to take? Can you sort of walk us through what you see needs to be done once there is a sort of a generalized picture of what we want to do?
I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I know obviously legislation takes effect in July, but I'm not sure if there's like a mandatory public comment period in terms of number of days, or like what the minimum length of time once it's if it was introduced in July until it would formally be adopted. But could certainly ask to figure it out, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
So let me, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to offer a couple of observations. First, what the new legislation will allow you to do is to amend the existing ordinance to add new powers. So you're not going to have to create an ordinance from scratch like the original members did. So what that will save some amount of time, because an ordinance itself just confers authority. The hard work is going to be on what the new legislation calls establishing your operating procedures. So what I think we'll need to do, or we'll need to help you do, is take what you've been calling your bylaws, set them up as a set of operating procedures, make sure you can, you have the procedures in place to start exercising the powers you already have. And while that's going on, work on getting best practices from NACOL, getting examples, and deciding how you would like to go about proposing to do the new things the legislation will let you do, and sort of add those to the bylaws as new modules. So what I think you can do that will save you some time is start building that set of operating procedures using building blocks, and collect all your examples, have discussions among yourselves how you want to do things, but start building those out so that when you do have a chance to go in front of City Council, you have a discussion draft of, you'll be able to say to them, look, the original CRB did a lot of research, and NACOL has some really great examples of, for example, how somebody might exercise disciplinary authority. And you can pick a couple of choices or something to determine how you want to have those discussions with City Council. But I think if you do it that way, it will save a lot of time. You can build on what you've got instead of going back to square one, but you can still have an opportunity to amend or modify what you have to make sure it all works together in the way that you would like it to work.
Thank you, Lisa. Miss Gilmore, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm just wondering if you had anything you'd like to say. Your name on the Zoom, but I think you're on mute though, if you are speaking right now. If I could unmute her mic, but look like I can. Anyway, anybody got any questions for Ms. Robertson or add-ons. Let's see.
Well, what does our vote mean in June now? We took a vote when we first met that we didn't like the November 2019 ordinance that was adopted by City Council. And we wanted to go back to that initial ordinance that also included bylaws that came out of the inaugural PCRB. What happens to that vote now that we took and asking the council? I know we have the new laws, but I think Lisa was saying we could go and write something right now that we could operate under, and we have those right now, but we wanted to go back to something a little bit more broader and a little bit more depth under the current, the guidelines up until this last special session took a vote. So where's that at?
You asking Lisa that question?
Yeah, or you.
Where's that at? That's a Lisa or Mr. Blair or one of those folks.
Well, it seems.
I can take a shot at it from a procedural perspective, and then you guys can talk about it from your board perspective. Procedurally, what I think you've got to decide is whether you want to get started with hearings in the near future. If you want to get started with hearings, my recommendation would be that you build a set of hearing procedures based on the authority that's in the existing ordinance. That will let you get started with your work. It will let you begin establishing important working relationships with each other as a board. It'll let you show everybody that you can do this well, you can get it done, and you can walk and chew gum at the same time. So if you do what you need to do to get started with exercising the authority you have under the existing ordinance, as you start hearing things and you start getting experience, you're gonna know through that experience what needs tweaking, and maybe it's going to include some of the things you were asking for previously. Maybe you're going to realize you want something entirely different. So you don't have to abandon the things you were thinking about previously, but I think that if you want to just wait to start doing the actual work until you have the perfect ordinance, which you're not going to get until at least July, I think using sort of a building block approach, which is making use of what you have and then working on everything else kind of simultaneously within that framework, is the best way for you all to do what I think I'm hearing you want to do, which is to at least get started being able to review appeals that are coming to you or complaints that are getting submitted to you. And you can do all of that at the same time. It's not an either or situation. So that's my procedural 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson.
So I guess the ball is in our court, kind of, in terms of organizing ourselves to begin addressing those meaty policy issues that Councilman Payne identified, re-examining our model, doing background research, finding model ordinances that address things like subpoena power and disciplinary action. And then over the course of the next few months, sharing that among ourselves and start pulling together a document or an outline. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And if I could just add, or go ahead.
I was going to say, as you do that work, as you come up with the examples that you like, or the modifications, or the things that you would like, then I can help you format those so we can plug it into the existing ordinance or propose modifications of the existing ordinance to include those new powers. So if you guys can do that work to identify the models you like and the best practices and sort of how you want to do it, then I can work with all of you to draft amendments to the existing ordinance to implement the basic power in the ordinance, but also to help you work up those. I think the bulk of your work is going to come in the operating procedures, because that's where you say how you do each of these things. And by far, the longest amount of time it's going to take you to get organized and up and running is not going to be adopting an ordinance. It's figuring out how to work with all of these different players in City Hall to get working relationships established that allow you to do your work. Record keeping, record exchanges, just all sorts of administrative stuff that's necessary to support your work. We've got to get those things in place.
Do you think, Ms. Robertson, that we're going to need something other than an ordinance and bylaws, something like a memorandum of understanding between us and the city? Or no, this is going to be everything. This is it.
What I would recommend that you do, you're still going to have an ordinance, because the local ordinance is what allows the city to put into effect the authority that the enabling legislation has given you. So it takes an ordinance of city council to activate those powers. But as you saw in the legislation says that city council will approve operating procedures. So what you want to do, we don't want to keep calling them bylaws. We're going to take what you've got, but we're going to build on them. They need to become operating procedures. And that's where all these details that you're really interested in are going to reside. They're going to say, it's going to be a lot of the types of things that the original board was trying to do in the memorandum of agreement. But the operating procedures are stronger because they're legislatively authorized. Council has to bless them. And by blessing them, council is sending the message that the various other departments in City Hall that are essential, their cooperation is essential to the work that you do. This is how everybody's got to operate. So they'll talk about the things that you're worried about, getting records and data and all that sort of stuff. We need to take all those different models that NACOL may have to offer, and let's say you want to do investigations on your own. Well, what does having investigative power entail? Like, how do you have to work with the police department? How do you work with community groups? How do you'll have subpoena power. How do you exercise that? And this document that's going to be operating procedures is going to be, that's going to be the document that is sort of your Bible. And that's where all of this stuff is going to reside.
You make it sound so simple.
I know it's not simple, but structurally,
straightforward,
it is kind of simple. Yep, structurally it is. It's not simple in practice.
All right.
Can I chime in here?
Yes, sir.
I could probably help you with that, knowing how the city operates and how, because we have standard operating procedures for practically everything and how it's set up and the language that they use. So when we get to that point, I can at least lend some advice or some direction on how it's structured and what everyone is used to seeing and hearing, if anyone's interested.
Thank you, Philip. All right, board. We got to keep the train moving. Wealth of information.
Just real quick.
Yes, sir.
Just real quick. It came up earlier of why have city council involved. I would just throw out this. At least my understanding, in our discussion tonight, is that where the board goes from here is not just like checking yes or no on boxes. When it comes to those operating procedures, it's a lot of gray area and nuance and multiple different potential models. And I would just throw out there that council is not aware of every model that exists throughout the country that would be similar to what you may be looking to do. We're also not aware of what every model is. So having that open line of communication with us is going to educate us as a council. And I think that will just be important for us as a body. And I'll just throw that out there.
I agree with that. I would say that I think our fear, a little bit of fear, is that we would get really educated, which would be awesome. But then if you all aren't on the same level or not informed, that we'll spend the time, and then at the end, boom, we're sorry guys, we don't like that idea. So I think as we're evolving, it definitely needs to be a healthy line of communication, right? I think we need that in the city, period, right now. It's a good, mature, we're all trying to figure this out. And I think anybody that's, decided they want to commit their life to being a civil servant or be on a board like this, you just want the best for the community. So, I hope that we can have a healthy line of communication. I know Nicole, actually, one of the things I was reading that they provide is almost like facilitators for some of those types of meetings too, between two different bodies, to kind of help, allow everybody to sort of get their points out, not talk over each other. And so that may be something we make use of. But yeah, so I think city council is definitely important as we're moving along, So, and I don't want us to get too far on their back burner. We don't want to, we'll be doing our work, but we don't want to show up in the summertime, people going on vacation, and and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this July 1st is right around the corner. So so we will definitely work with you to try to get even a kickoff, even if we don't have everything, just get that conversation started, right? And after at least the ED's in place, if that ends up being sometime in mid-January and then early February, I do think a discussion is valuable, and we'll have our ducks in a row, for that discussion. So doesn't have to be a 5-hour discussion, it could be an hour and a half, but we haven't really, other than yourself, it's been a while since we've collaborated with our city council. All right, y'all. We are moving along. I got so many notes and chicken scratch everywhere on my little piece of paper. So complaints is the next item, and the complaint section, Lisa, it's like I can only say so much about them in this forum, and that's it's just limited. And so since we started, we received 8 complaints. We have one that we are working on. Bellamy's going to do a presentation on our draft hearing document that we put together. We do have one that a hearing request was made, and that's kind of one of our main focuses, and we'll be through December, and then hopefully we're on par by late January to conduct a hearing. So but we received 8, and I'm limited at what I can say. That's kind of where they stand. The other thing, moving on to the next item.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing, are we sure we've gotten, I think we were talking about,
Right.
If you want complaints filed to the CRB, you have to check that little box at the bottom of the complaint page. Are there any that, that's such a tiny box like you were talking about earlier, it may get overlooked and it may not be something that someone is given consideration to do? Are we sure that we've gotten all those types of complaints? That's just one kind of question, is that are we seeing any from the oversight timeline that we have at all? And that's to be determined later, but that was my question.
Yeah, one of the things too is I would really like to rework the website, our website and their website. There's some good websites that people can submit a complaint on a phone, because right now there's a PDF on the police website, and you have to have a software program that you can even type in a PDF, and then somebody may not even know, how to do that. So I think there could be a more user-friendly way to allow people to come forward, submit a complaint that's not so clunky. I think once we get our executive director, that will kind of free up some more time for us to work on that. But a lot of us receiving complaints is based on also the honor of the police department. If somebody didn't send it to us, then it's not like we have a joint mailbox either that goes in and kicks it out to two places, right? So I know the chief does put summaries of complaints on the website, and there's about 3 years worth of data, but it's and they have said, hey, James, or Bellamy, because Bellamy's my guy who kind of manages complaints. They have said, hey, here's one that didn't come to you guys, bam. But there's a little bit of honor code, in the way the system currently works. And then, as Sarah pointed out, there's a lot of criteria that has to be met, such that something could come through and we may not see it if certain things aren't met with a complaint. And those are the types of things we'll be looking at to make sure we are getting everything right. Not a perfect process. Yes, sir.
If I can just throw this out there, and this is, I check in pretty frequently to keep track with those things, and I haven't had any issues with information, being withheld. I think, as a matter of fact, I think in comparing where the two stand, what we've had, there was record of, but I was informed of the newness of some others. So, and that's just my experience. It's not to say that history doesn't play its role, but yeah, if that is an area of deep concern, obviously we need to address that. But my point in saying that is I think that there is some forthrightness that I've seen just in my minimal interaction so far.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. That's very clarifying.
And I think also once you guys start rolling up your sleeves and getting into the business of having hearings and get into a more of an active working relationship, I think you'll be able to build trust, but you'll also be able to build procedures that lead to trust. And so right now you're just kind of in limbo because you haven't actually started the hearing process yet. So you don't necessarily have an established working relationship as a practical matter, but you're working on it and we're going to get you there.
Yeah, and we live in a Zoom environment too, on top of that, right? Again, I say it every meeting, but we really not all ever met each other. So,
yeah,
makes things a little strange at times, but we're getting there. Next item is, I wanted to cover this. Is community engagement. I was reading a pretty good article about how do you kind of facilitate community engagement during a pandemic, right? What are some of the strategies? I sent Mr. Wheeler a PowerPoint. If you have that, can you put that up? Oh, okay. So I'm gonna there's just a few points I pulled out of this, and I can send this out to the board. But it's a pretty interesting article. Can you go to the next slide? And so, what the article talks about is if we want to get out and meet the community, know that we're here to, we want to build trust, we want to listen, we want to help make the community better. We should be establishing partnerships and relationships with people that are already, or organizations that are already champions of the community. So I can't really see the slide that well, but religious organizations, nonprofits, people that are already, doing work that sort of complements our mission. And I've got to
I can
Okay.
blow it up for you if you'd like.
Well, you know what? Actually, you know what? If you do what you did a minute ago, that might work. My all of our faces was in front of the words.
Yeah.
The other thing is there's a lot of, since COVID, there's been a lot of events like I think on the downtown mall there was a coat drive, a coat giveaway. There's been events at some of the schools where they make sure the kids have laptops, and so we want to keep our eyes on these various events, because there are some in-person things that are happening where we can get out there and meet people and say, hey, we're here, and make those connections. Let's see, can you scroll down a little bit? The other thing, I mean, this could be good and bad, but as we're evolving, social media is a tool to get our information out there of who we are. There's a site that I like that somebody started here in Charlottesville when the pandemic hit. It's called Mutual Aid for people of Charlottesville. And if somebody needs daycare, if somebody lost their job, somebody's family member has COVID and they just need help, or or even if somebody has something to offer, they're a yoga instructor, they know how to work with kids who are not in school, and and I think we can start something like that. And when I first saw social media in this article, I said, oh, that could lead to nasty comments. But then what I remembered about that other site is you can have a active moderator. So if somebody wants to kind of bomb your site and say bad stuff, you don't have to approve. It goes to a moderator and they approve or disapprove. So there may be some things we can do in leveraging social media. The other thing, we're obviously doing Zoom meetings. Those of us who want to do Zoom and Teams for work, it gets old, but I'm always thinking about all the folks that are not comfortable with Zoom or comfortable with Wi-Fi or don't have it, and how do we, connect with those folks. But one thing about Zoom, you don't have to have Wi-Fi. As long as you have at least a phone, you can call in, and that still may not be ideal for everybody, and it doesn't replace a human interaction. But I just wanted to put these ideas out there as we're thinking about, how are we going to get sort of community involvement, be connected, during the pandemic, right? It's real. I mean, we got started right in the middle of a pandemic when we didn't even know if we can go to the grocery store for more than 10 minutes. I think most of us know now, if you wear a mask and use hand sanitizer, socially distance, we have a better idea of how to grasp it than we did when we first got started. But and these are some of the things that that we can utilize as we're moving forward. Okay, Lisa just pointed out the need to get our hearing procedures down packed. I don't know if we're going to get that down packed tonight, but I asked Mr. Brown to kind of give go over the hearing procedure process. And so, Mr. Brown, if you've got, I think Mr. Wheeler has a copy. We didn't send this out to the public just yet because it's still kind of rough draft, but we can obviously get it out to folks. But yeah, Mr. Brown, if you could kind of walk us through that, that'd be great.
Sure. I think Lisa popped up. Did you have something? Okay. And this isn't final. Again, this is kind of almost a working deal amongst the board itself. This is for the public, just so that we can kind of discuss what's there and make any adjustments as we see fit. And then after that point, the public will be able to offer its perspective. So yeah, this is so Brian, if we can go to the next one there. So this is kind of the format of hearings itself, based on another model, a hearing model that we had done research and found for hearings themselves. And again, please chime in with any questions or anything as we go through this. But just in setting it up, I'll kind of summarize. I don't want to read everything there, but any hearing before the PCRB is obviously not as formal as a court of law. We will use Robert's Rules of Orders, Uniform Code of Parliamentary Procedures, and then they're open to the public unless the PCRB votes to convene with any closed portion of it in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Do we want to go slide by slide and ask questions afterwards, or just questions all at the end?
Maybe we'll wait till the end unless somebody's got like a really burning question. Let me ask you now.
Okay. And Nancy, as far as your question, yes, these can be sent out. This is the slides themselves are just a breakdown of the draft document itself. Brian, if we can do the next one. So generally, I mean, at the time it was a seven member panel, obviously. That's where we are. So 7-member panel that will hear evidence from both the complainant and also CPD or representative. And then the board will arrive at a ruling. After the introductions, Mr. Chair will start the meeting. On this part here, we can make adjustments as necessary, but both parties have the right to examine, cross-examine, and rebut evidence presented. And any public portions may be videoed. Hold on. Any public portions may be videoed by individuals as long as it doesn't impede or disrupt the conduct of the meeting itself. Mr. Wheeler, next slide, please. And so these are subsections underneath the previous slide. All members must sign an affidavit stating that we haven't communicated with any other person regarding the hearing. Prior to commencing the hearing, Mr. Chair will verify that that each of us is in attendance and then also has signed the required affidavit. If not, the member will not be allowed to participate in the hearing itself. The complainant can designate in writing to have someone else as an appointment of agent on their behalf. They would file that with the executive director first, and those forms will be obviously put on the PCRB website or at the deputy clerk of counsel's office. The complainant's authorized agent can offer evidence and explanations. No person will be recognized as an appointment of agent unless there is the fully executed appointment of agent form, and that will be done in writing, and the chairperson, Mr. Chair, will verify the receipt of the executed form prior to recognizing that representative to speak. And then subsequent to that, the CPD will offer evidence and explanations regarding their stance. Mr. Wheeler. So the information, I mean, just because we're limited on time and we really want to get to the heart of the matter, the information, evidence, and comments must be strictly in keeping with the review request that's before the PCRB itself, not anything that's outstanding. You can testify, the complainant can testify either orally or by sworn affidavit. That we would not be the ones swearing the affidavits. That would be something that they would have to obtain on their own. If the complainant cannot attend the hearing at the scheduled date and time, they can present their evidence again in the form of an affidavit in advance by mail or delivery to the office of the deputy clerk of counsel. The affidavit must have the complainant's name, the date and time of the hearing, and it must be executed before notary public. That's where the sworn affidavit comes into play, or other public official who's authorized to administer oaths. For an affidavit to be considered, it must arrive at the PCRB office prior to the date and time of the hearing. And I've left this part in here. There's been some guidance by Ms. Robertson that, you know, some of this can be adjusted in terms of to make it more simpler. But you know, a copy of all evidence submitted to the PCRB must be retained. So not accepting a DVD, CD-ROM, memory card, PC, PDAs, video recorders, all those things, all those devices. It's my understanding that there is a way to accept some of that information in those forms, but I'd left that part in there just for discussion purposes to see how the board wanted to move forward with that from there. Mr. Wheeler? So closing out the format of the hearing, the guidelines for standards of documentation. This is just kind of a straightforward, simple blurb here. Again, this goes into you know, streamlining the process and really getting to the heart of the matter. Essentially, preparing a simple, well-organized presentation, listing the key facts in logical order, and this will allow us to do our job more efficiently. We would look for you to bring an original and one copy of each document that you want the board to consider to the hearing. The original copy will be retained for official records. And if the complaint itself is supported by factual data and information, then we can quickly and easily understand the arguments and really get to, you know, some sort of a resolution there itself. Mr. Wheeler? So the length of the hearing, these gaps are there to, you know, for us to, you know, talk about and discuss filling those in. But the hearings before the PCRB are held at, you know, wherever the location is going to be. We got to, again, be fairly, you know, rigid in maintaining our schedule. Cannot set a time, cannot always set a time that's convenient for each complainant. And usually, you know, in the forums that I've seen, the meetings were, you know, 15 minutes, but you know, obviously we can have that 45 minutes or what have you to plug into there. PCRB allows the complainant. You do have, so that 15 minutes was the first one. This complainant was the 7 minutes for to present relevant evidence, and then there was another 7 minutes for the CPD in this case to present their evidence, and then you had, you know, kind of that 1 minute wrap up. Again, obviously, you know, the time frame would be longer, and we could, you know, talk about that, you know, as needed. We do have the option of setting other time limits based on the work that we're doing at the time, and the hearings are scheduled at specific date and times. We can set up, you know, whether we want it ad hoc or we want to do it, you know, at a particular day and time, you know, each month or however we want. Basically a standing, you know, date and time. This part I left in italics, first come, first served basis. I don't know if we want to adjust that. But also failure to appear at the in-person or by sworn evidence to support the claim could result in an unfavorable finding, you know, relative to complaint. I mean, I think in thinking about this more, I think maybe if we, and this will come with regard to rescheduling, either it just doesn't get, well, we wouldn't really be able to do anything because we don't have information there to begin with, but, you know, table that for, you know, for some other time. Obviously still operating under that, that 1 year time frame that the complainant has to file their case. Mr. Wheeler? And then finally, actually, no, this is next class. So with regard to PCRB decisions, once we've heard all testimony, examined all evidence, we'll make our findings within 30 days. That's in accordance with, obviously, the city code section there. At times, it may be necessary for us to review and discuss sensitive matters in a closed session as part of the hearing. That's an option, that we have in addition with the Zoom environment. I think that particular section goes into what Ms. Robertson was saying with regard to operational procedures as well, having some, specific direction in terms of how we go about doing that. So the final PCRB decision will be publicly announced at a regular meeting, and it will also be communicated to the complainant in writing or his or her authorized agent by certified mail or other means. And a copy will be sent to the complainant, the city manager, the chief of police by email. The written copy itself will be signed by the chairman and specify the disposition in accordance, again, with 2461E. Mr. Wheeler? And so this is the final section with regard to rescheduling a hearing. So the board can reschedule a hearing at any time determined, by the board. There are 6 criteria that are just off the bat, that are reasonable cause for not showing up. Requests for, and there's active duty military, hospital under doctor's care, death in the family, immediate family being in attendance at a judicial legislative session, failure to receive adequate notice or opportunity to prepare, and other matters, again, for good cause as determined by the board itself. And then requests from CPD itself will also be considered for continuance for similar reasons. And the notice itself must come in a written form to verify the rescheduling requests itself. Mr. Wheeler? And so at this point, are there any questions or comments?
Bellamy or Lisa, do we have any, would there be a problem? I mean, since we're going to be starting hearings in late January, maybe February, of holding an electronic hearing?
No, not under the current emergency orders, but we will have to arrange for staffing for those. If you've watched any city council meetings or planning commission meetings, they would need to work sort of like those. And as you know, in relation to city council's meetings, when they have a need to go into a closed session, they have to make a motion, and then they actually go onto a different platform and have the closed meeting, and then they come back and come back into open session after they're finished. So it can be done, and as long as there is the staffing for it, the law allows for that sort of thing to happen right now.
Okay, thanks.
And there is, we do have that capability of what's called the quote unquote breakout rooms. And that would allow us to go into those closed sessions to be able to do whatever we need to do or discuss, and then come back into the full panel itself.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I appreciate all this hard work. It's very, very easy to understand your slides. I like that tonight. But yeah, what I would like to know, like, I would prefer it making a standing meeting, like, this particular time each month, if, the appeal meets whatever the criteria will be, this is the time that we set aside to do an appeal hearing. It might be easier budgeting the time for staff, to be available to handle, this instead of, having it seems like it could be all over the calendar. But I think it would be beneficial for me, or at least I would think it would be beneficial to have it, a set day or a set time in that document.
Mr. Chair, did you, I guess, have an idea of how you wanted to go about getting what that set time would be?
Yeah, I mean, well, I didn't, but that does make sense, right? I mean, I did take note on the first come first serve wording in it, which is not really ideal wording, but it is a draft. And we don't, at the moment, we don't have that many of these, right?
Mhm.
But in a year's time, I don't know how many we're going to have, but I think it would be, and we might need to coordinate with Brian Wheeler or the city's, the cadence of the meetings and their availability. But we might say, hey, like every third Wednesday is the day that we do hearings. I didn't have any rhyme or reason necessarily, but if we get 30 complaints a year, maybe a certain percentage of those will evolve into a hearing, and then we could end up with 5 to 10 a year. So maybe just picking a day, and we don't need to do that day now. I don't think.
Sure.
We'll
Yeah.
coordinate with the schedule,
Yeah.
city, and just see what what looks best for their availability, and even ours too, because like sometimes things right at 5 o'clock may be difficult for us. But that does make a lot of sense, right? As opposed to first come, first serve, or we don't know when they're going to be, or
Sure.
yeah.
And at some point, we'll be meeting face to face again. It might be a little bit easier.
I can't wait.
I can't wait either. I want to be in the room. Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, maybe just to start off with, we, figure out, like you said, what day of the week and which day and what time, or I guess if we have to do it within our body of our own meetings, if one's coming up, we know, when you set up the agenda, I guess, to devote most of that time to that particular hearing, if we have to go that way.
Well, I think that we don't use up a meeting, I don't believe. I remember back when Stuart was part of the board, we were asking about that, if we kind of lose a meeting by having a hearing. And I think that we can still have a meeting, but yet have a hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to kind of burning up a meeting,
Okay.
Which is good because it gives us more, times to meet. Looks like Brian's there. I guess we're coming to an end, or
No. I just wanted to chime in on that last
Yes, sir.
topic. The way we view it would be that a hearing is it's a requirement of your work,
Right.
and we wouldn't count that as one of the, during this pandemic, that would not be one of the 2 meetings you'd be allowed to have
Right.
in a given month. So it's just something you have to do, and we would support it whenever you need to do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll within a short time frame, we'll kind of pencil in or come up with a date and a cadence, and that could change depending on how many of these we have, and how things evolve over time. The other thing we need to do is we need to get examples of other hearing procedures, and so we can work with NACOL. And I was actually surprised tonight when they informed us that there are about 39 other towns that are fairly small, like Charlottesville, that have subpoena power and disciplinary power. Because all I've been hearing is how we're the smallest town that has a CRB, which kind of makes sense. But apparently there are some other small towns that we can get some examples. So I think that one of the list of things that we'll put together as we're trying to also get a little more training and more information is getting some other draft procedures to bounce our draft off of. Anybody? If nobody has a comment right now about the hearing procedures, we do have another public comment section and a window, and I don't know if there's any folks out there. Brian, do we have some folks?
Mr. Chairman, we do have 6 people in the audience. If you'd like to get in line to speak to the board, just click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. If you're on via telephone, you can press *9. And I see we have both Sarah Burke, who's on as a panelist, and Katrina Turner. And first I'm going to go to Katrina Turner. Katrina, you're on with the board and you've got 3 minutes. Can you hear us, Katrina?
Oh, can y'all hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
How are y'all doing?
Pretty good. Good evening.
I just have a couple questions. I want to ask about the question Ms. Carpenter asked about reverting back to the bylaws and the ordinances that we wrote. I understand Ms. Robertson answered the question, but she answered the question to where what she would do, how she would work it. I don't think, I've been cooking all day for Thanksgiving, just to let y'all know. And I didn't hear her actually answer Ms. Carpenter's question about the bylaws and the ordinances reverting back to what we wrote. She said what she would do. But if you all could revert back to what we wrote and then start building off of that, would that be better? You know, because this is one problem that we had to be independent. You know, we kept getting what they wanted us to do, everything they wanted us to do, you know. So I'd like to know the answer to, can you all revert back to what we wrote? Not what the suggestion is, but as City Council said, when they adopted this watered down version, that when the new board is formed, they can revert back to what we wrote. So that's the answer I think we all need to hear about going back to what we wrote, and then maybe y'all building from that. And the second thing is your member on your board. You know, you had a qualified member, Miss Parker, to be on this board. And when Stewart quit, why is it that it did not go back to who was on that list for this board? Why has, and I really think y'all need to ask this, why has Miss Parker been just shunned from this board when she is fully qualified to be on this board? And this board is not fully formed right now. Why the wait on finding another member for this CRB? We shouldn't have to wait when there's somebody there that can be on this board right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next up is Sarah Burke. Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the discussion tonight and Lisa Robertson's suggestions. I love Katrina's idea of sort of thinking about it from the, you know, what is missing from the initial CRB's proposal and sort of building some of that back into it too, instead of kind of building on this watered down model to try to add all these powers. Like, so I think that's a great suggestion. And I also want to just re-emphasize the point of like emphasizing to the city that you all really want to try to get your final board member on board here. And, you know, I feel like there's been a lot of delaying, and I don't mean to say that I think that that's necessarily like intentional or obstructionist, but I do think that, you know, there's been a delay for the you know, to wait for the legislation. And now there's a talk of a delay for a new city manager. And, you know, there's just been a lot of turnover and change. And, you know, I, for one, think it might be good for somebody to come into this, a city manager to come into this role with something more highly functioning and kind of prepared and ready to roll out, rather than, you know, we've sort of seen interim city managers and our last city manager like not really know where to go with the CRB because it didn't really have, you know, its own identity established. And so I'm concerned about sort of waiting to hire an ED until there's a city manager, or waiting to have work sessions until later. It just sort of all kind of has this tone of delay, which is what, you know, at least I feel like I heard a lot of in my time on the CRB, and I'm seeing it as a spectator at this point. And then my only other comment, so I have to be frank, I only caught the second half of Mr. Brown's presentation on the operating procedures for the, so I might have missed a bunch of stuff. So if I'm wrong, please forgive me. But I'm wondering sort of where your role of independent legal counsel comes in here. I know you all asked to have an attorney, but one of the main reasons for having independent legal counsel was for your hearing procedures, just so that Ms. Robertson isn't in a position of being kind of having a conflict between the complainant and the police officer in question. So I think that needs to be in place. And I also just, the tone of some of that language to me felt kind of like it was discouraging complainants in a way, sort of saying, like, if I read that as a complainant, I would think, oh, there's all these ways they're trying to cut me out of this process or keep me from having a hearing, as opposed to feeling like it was a welcoming and environment where I was actively participating. So I just encourage you to try to reword things as if you're imagining yourselves as the complainant, instead of thinking yourselves as the folks trying to sort of speak legalese and you know, like get the process figured out. Like take it from the empathic lens first would be my suggestion there. But thanks for letting me participate in this part as well.
Thank you.
If you're in the audience, you'd like to address the board, click the raise hand icon in the Zoom webinar. And there are no other hands raised at this time, Mr. Watson.
Okay, all right. I think got so many notes here. All right, so, well, very informative. And the key is now to, you know, kind of get to work and begin to do research and connect with Nicole and sort of, and Ms. Burke as well, and Harold Foley and some of the other champions of this work, Ms. Turner. And so we got to really, we got to get on that, got to start doing that. Got to figure out how to do it during the pandemic. You know, we got to get working in our breakout groups. And I'll send out some information this week, you know, with our breakout groups and some ideas for how we can start moving out on some of these things and beginning to sort of leverage the talent that we have.
Just with that, I mean, you know, Ms. Johnson and I are working on community engagement. Are you creating a separate type of working group other than that? I mean, I just want to, you know, so that we don't all walk over each other's toes. Just that could be part of what you send out. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, but I mean, you know, like that little presentation I was giving, you know, maybe there's some ideas that could even help advance what you all are working on.
Yeah, can you send that out to us? Is that
yeah, I'll send it out to you. Yep. But yeah, I mean, and it's not just me sending stuff out. Obviously, it's just you know, figuring out how to kind of move this this locomotive forward, you know, on a nice path, you know, with the various workarounds and also, keeping that line of communication with city council, and at least having some form of a work session kickoff, not in April, not in May, but hopefully by February. So, I'm kind of just babbling here, but
So I would
just got to bring it all together.
Yeah, and I would just say,
Mike.
definitely stay, we want, city council wants to be proactive in being part of this process and to be able to provide you with clarity and not end up in a situation where you don't know what we're expecting or what we're looking for. As well as, I think council, we're starting from the goal of how can we as much as possible be ready to go in July, and working backwards from there of, how can we be supportive, or what do you all need to get us there? And also just being honest about our limitations in terms of challenges that there's going to be. And I think we can meet that timeline, but, we just want to have a dialogue on it and are certainly open to you all beginning groundwork before a work session and thinking about, what specifically we want in a work session. So I just want to reiterate, we're not trying to say it must be this way or that way, but we really want to have a collaborative conversation and be able to give collective direction as council as this moves forward.
Yeah, and I also think that it may be helpful for, members of council who are available as we learn more about our training opportunities with NACO, but for some of you all to kind of get immersed in that and learn, what the possibilities are, because it is a different type of education, right? Even for folks that have a background in law and policing. I mean, when I watch the videos, I'm like, wow, I never thought of that. So we may want to try to bring you guys in on some of those sessions. So again, that we're not coming to you in May or June with an idea and we've reimagined all this stuff, and then you guys are like, nope, we're sorry.
We don't want that to happen either, because I think that will just further erode the trust in the work that you all continue to put into this.
Okay, well, if there's no more comments or questions, let's call this meeting to adjourn. Up, Philip, you got something popped up?
Nope.
You good?
I was just going to say our next meeting is now on the 10th of December, correct? That's the regularly
yes,
scheduled
sir.
meeting. Okay.
Yeah, and I Ms. Robinson, I think you said you penciled in another meeting. I don't know if we're going to all be able to meet as a group. The entire board after that, because 2 weeks after that's Christmas Eve.
So I had reserved an additional meeting for you for the month of December, but I don't believe you've determined a date yet.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. And December is it's December, right? Christmas,
December,
New Year's.
yeah.
So we can meet, in our 2-person breakout groups, but it may be difficult to get 2 meetings in like this month with Christmas and New Year's. Anyway, y'all have a great Thanksgiving. Hope everybody's safe, eats plenty of turkey, sees their loved ones, and just has a good time with their family.
Take care,
all. Right. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.